All right, everyone. So this is going to be a tutorial for those of you that need a little bit of extra help completing your poems. I was looking through a lot of people's assignments and I'm noticing that many of you have one stanza, but you don't have the other. So I just want to quickly go through everything that you would need to kind of help you with your thinking. I will not be writing it for you. I will not be filling in the blanks for you. That is your responsibility. So look at the comments that are attached to this assignment so you can watch some videos to review some information. Everything else is going to be here. I've already typed out the sentence stems that I would normally give you if I was helping you one-on-one. What I'm going to be doing as I explain is I'll highlight them like this when I'm talking about each line. Okay? So if we look at our first stanza, remember we're talking about intolerance in the past. And if we're talking about intolerance in the past, then we can just open our poem with that line. We used to see intolerance in the past. You guys can use that line in your poem. Start your first sentence or your first line like that. For your second line, it's during the Holocaust. So I'm telling you what you should be talking about next. During the Holocaust, what happened? What took place during the Holocaust? What was the big event? How would we define that? Go ahead and pause your video right now and fill in the blank. All right, now we're going to come back to here. You should have filled in the blank. You should have paused the video, filled in the blank. Now we're going to be moving on to this section, which is how people felt. This is your third line. So we just talked about what the Holocaust was and what happened during the Holocaust. How did people feel at that time? How did the Jewish people feel? Did they feel upset? And why did they feel upset? Did they feel angry? Why did they feel angry? Did they feel like life was unfair? Why did they feel that way? So for this line, you're going to explain how did people feel. Go ahead and pause your video to fill in this line. Pause your video, fill in this line, come back to it once you're done filling in this line. Okay, now we're going to move on to this line. So everything should be filled in up until this point. For this line, you're going to explain what is intolerance. Define it. What does intolerance mean? Intolerance is when people don't accept others. Why? Okay, so you're going to pause the video, fill in this line. What is intolerance? All right, you should have filled in this line with what intolerance is. Now we're going to move on to this line, which says we used to see. So we're moving from the Holocaust to talking about the other event, which is apartheid. What did we used to see during that time? We used to see races separated. We used to see people treating others poorly. What were some of the things that we used to see? That's how you're going to fill in this line. What did we used to see? And we're using that past tense because remember, stanza 1 is talking only about the past. So go ahead and pause your video to fill in this line. Only come back to it once this line is filled in. All right, so we said what we used to see. Now we're going to move on to specifically talk about what apartheid is. Now remember, if you don't remember what apartheid is, in this assignment on Google Classroom, I did add a comment on the actual posting on Google Classroom that has a little video link so you can watch to remember what apartheid was. You should probably mention that it's in South Africa. You should probably mention what two groups it was between, but you're going to fill in the blank explaining what was apartheid. So go ahead and pause your video to fill in the blank. What was apartheid? All right, we're going to move on to the next line. Similarly to what we did for the Holocaust, how did people feel during apartheid? How do you think Black South Africans felt at that time? Angry, upset, like life was unfair, really similar to how Jewish people felt during the Holocaust. But you're going to fill in the blank telling me how did people feel during apartheid? Go ahead and pause your video, fill in that blank, come back to it when you're done. All right, now we're going to move on to our last one. In the past, how were people treated? In the past, how did people deal with not liking another group? In the past, what was the solution to not accepting others? What kinds of actions did people take? Violent actions, extreme actions. You're going to pause, fill in the blank, come back to the video when you're done. All right, now we're going to move on to this last line. If you have any other thoughts you want to add, I want you to add them here. If you are struggling to get anything added, then I would probably start with people should not have done what? And then what should people have done instead? So for these two lines, you're kind of making a little comparison. People shouldn't have done this. They should have done this. So people shouldn't have thought that people that were different were bad. People should have accepted others for who they are. Don't use those lines, but that's an example of how you could fill it in. Go ahead and pause your video. Take as much time as you need to fill in these lines. Make sure your whole first stanza is done before you move on to the second one. All right, now we're going to move on to stanza 2. So stanza 2 is talking about intolerance in the present, what exactly intolerance in the present looks like. Now we see Black Lives Matter. Okay, you can use that whole first line for the stanza. Why was it created? It was created for what purpose? Was it created to throw parties? Was it created to protest, to fight, to speak out? What was the whole reason behind creating that? So you're on this line right now. It was created to. Go ahead and pause your video. Come back to it when you're done. All right, now you're coming back to this line. We're going to move on to now what do we see? Now what do we see happening to Black people? What's happening to Black people in this country? What's going on? Go ahead and pause your video. Make sure you come back to it when you're done. Now, why is this happening to Black people? That's what our next line is. What's happening to Black people? Our next line, why is it happening to Black people? Go ahead and pause your video, fill in the blank, come back to it when you're done. Okay, now we're going to move on to this line, but. Are there other things that happen in the world that have to do with intolerance? Some of the things we brainstormed were LGBTQ rights, immigration, current president. What are some things that happen in the world that show intolerance, that show the refusal to accept others? So, but this is not the only thing. But this is not the only problem. You could fill in the blank with something like that. And then pause, fill in the blank. All right, now we're going to move on to this next line. If you're mentioning it's not the only problem, now what else do we see? So now we see issues within the LGBTQ community, issues between in immigration. Now we see ICE putting kids in cages. What are some of the things we see now? That's how you'll fill in the blank. Go ahead and press pause, fill in the blank, come back to it when you're done. All right, next line, I want you to explain a little bit. What else do we see here? Like, what is that thing that you were talking about? If you mentioned LGBTQ rights, explain what happens to people in that community. If you talked about immigration, what happens to people who are captured by ICE? Just explain, elaborate about what you mentioned in the previous line. So go ahead and pause, fill in the blank, come back to this. All right, now these last two lines are what people should do. What should people do today? We're ending it similarly to how we ended our first stanza. What should people do today? That's how you fill in the first line. And if they don't, what's going to happen? That's how you fill in the second line. So it's kind of like our call to action, what we want to leave our reader with. Now, keep in mind that this is something I would do with you guys one-on-one. If you were to work with me one-on-one, if you were to come to tutoring, I would be able to give you more feedback on what you're writing, but I'm going to give you the same exact guidance. So I won't give you more guidance than this because I need to see you guys doing the thinking and doing the writing. Remember, poetry gets to be as creative or as plain as you want it to be. It's really up to you. But I'm giving you an outline to hopefully help those of you that are struggling to get started or struggling to get it finished, because this is a huge part of your grade. And I really want to make sure everybody's able to get it done. Okay? If you have questions, email me, ask me during class, but use this video, pause during the times I say to pause, use the resources that I've given you, your article, the YouTube videos I posted, any of that stuff is going to help you. Okay? You can do this. I promise you can. I promise you as an 8th grade student that you have the capabilities and you have the skills to get this done. You just have to make a decision to do it. Okay? Hopefully this helps, and I will see you guys next time I see you in class.